Hi, this is Bill Hitchcock, and in this clip we're going to do a little bit of programming and demonstrate how to work with some loops. So the first thing I've got here is just a new Raptor program, and let's save this and we'll call it loop test, and we're going to drop a loop in here right off the bat. And you can see what it does is it starts a loop, looks at a condition. If that condition's true, we escape the loop, but if it's not true, we're going to come back up here and go back and do the loop again. So I need a couple of things. Let's put some output statements in here. And in my first output, I'm just going to say get ready to enter the loop. And then we'll do another input, and we'll put, or I'm sorry, another output, excuse me, and we'll put that here. Whoops, let's try that again. There we go. And this one is we are in the loop. And when we're all done, we're going to print something that just lets us know we are all done outside the loop. So save that, and if I try to run it, it gives us an error because I forgot to put a condition in. So let's try adding a condition. So for my condition is we might try count equals x plus 2, count exclamation point equal to 5. That means count is not equal to 5, and so on. So what if we just try something like if sum num equals 0, just to give a condition. And we'll run this, save it, run it, get ready to enter the loop, and we got an error that says sum num is not found. So let's give this a try then. Let's do an input, and we'll put that up here, and we'll say enter some number. And we'll call that variable sum num. Save this, run it, try that again, we'll save it. Oh, I guess I lost that. Let me try this again. Enter some number. And I want to call this sum num. There we go. Save that. Let's try to run this. Enter some number, 4. And we're in the loop. And we're still in the loop. And it looks like I'm stuck in the loop forever because basically sum num is never going to equal 0. And we're in the loop every single time. So what I've got to do is just try to stop this program, and that's what's known as being stuck in an infinite loop. Now if I would run this and try 0, in this case it never goes into the loop, it just drops right outside of here, so that would work. So actually what I might want to do then is let's take this enter some number and put that inside of our loop, and we'll save this, and now we'll run it, and it says get ready to enter the loop, enter some number. Alright, let's try 4. We're in the loop. It says enter some number. Alright, we'll try 5, still in the loop. We enter 2, still in the loop. And unless we know to type in a 0, we're going to be stuck inside that loop until finally we type in 0. So what we should do then is change this prompt and tell them how do you get out. And we'll put in parentheses, enter 0 to quit. And that way, when we do this, we can run this, get ready to enter the loop, enter some number, 0 to quit. We'll try a number, we'll try 6. We're in the loop. Try another number, 8. We're in the loop. I type in 0. Oops, I went a little bit too fast. I better try that one more time, make sure my program's working. Get ready to enter it. Let's try 6. Enter 8. Enter 0. And I'm all done. So that worked. Alright, so there's the concept of working through with loops. Alright, so got that program saved. Let's make this do some other things. So let's try a new program. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask how many times do you want to run this loop? So my prompt is, how many times would you like to run the loop? Question mark, quote, and we're going to call that a variable, how many. So we'll put a loop here. So we ask how many times do we want to run the loop, and then we need to count up how many times it's going to be in the loop. So I need a counter variable, and the way you set counter variables up is first thing you have to initialize them. So outside of your loop, I'm going to create a counter variable called loop count, loop CNT, and you set that equal to 0. So that's what they did here. They had an array variable that they set equal to 0. We're going to have a variable that we're setting equal to 0. We ask the user how many times they want to count the loop. We enter into the loop, and then we want to check to see if that loop count is equal to how many times. So if the loop count is either greater than or equal to how many. If that's true, I want to escape the loop and tell them, thank you for using this program. But if it's not, what I have to do is I have to add 1 to my loop count. So the way that I add 1 to it is I use an assignment statement, and I say set the loop count to whatever was in the loop count, in this case 0 plus 1. So this is a classic counter variable in a program. You set a variable equal to the variable plus 1. Now in math class, if you ever said something like x equals x plus 1, it's a false statement. X can never be x plus 1. But in programming, what it does is it takes whatever was in x, or in this case loop count, adds 1 to it and puts that right back into the same variable. Now I also want to print this out, because otherwise it's kind of a boring program. So let's just say the loop number is loop count, and save our program. We're going to call this our loop count program. Run it. How many times do you want to run the loop? Let's try it 3 times. Loop's 1, loop is 2, loop is 3. It's equal to how many, which was 3, and it drops out. Thanks for using the program. Let's speed this up a little bit. Run it one more time. We'll try it 10 times. Loops 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Thank you. It worked with 10. We'll test it one more time. Let's try it with 0 times, see what happens. It just thanks us for using it. Let's try it with 2 times, make sure that it works. Big, small numbers seems to work. I'm sure you could type in 1,000,000, but you'd probably be sitting there waiting for a while to do this. All right, so there's, like I say, a classic counter variable. Now what I want to do is I want to find out what happens if I accumulate these numbers. So I'm going to go File, Save As, and call this my loop sum program. So I need another variable, call it my loop sum, and I'm going to set that equal to 0. So this is what's going to be known as an accumulator variable. So with both counters and accumulators, we always initialize them. You set them to 0. You do that outside your loop. Then inside the loop, I'm going to add 1 to the counter. Then I want to add that to my accumulator. So I'm going to put an assignment statement down here and say that the loop sum is equal to the loop sum plus my loop count. So it'll be 1, then 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 3 would be 6, and so on. And then we're going to display all this out. So I've got my loop count plus the loop sum is joined with the variable loop sum. Save this. Run it. Let's try doing this 5 times. And it adds up those numbers. 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 3 is 6, 6 plus 4 is 10, 10 plus 5 is 15. It added up all the numbers 1 through 5. And we could run it 1 through 10 and test things out, see how all that works. So that works pretty well. All right, let's make another file save. And finally what I want to show you is I want to do some loop random numbers to show you how random numbers work. Random numbers are just what they sound like. The computer is going to pick a number out of a hat at random. So to do random numbers, we don't have to initialize anything, but what we do have to do is someplace in either a loop or someplace in the program, we just have to establish a random number. So I'm going to put an assignment here. And I'm going to say let rand num, my variable, set that equal to a function that's called the random function. All right, so there's a bunch of built-in functions into Raptor, just like you'd have in Excel or some other programs. So we say that this is equal to random. So what random returns is a number between 0 and almost 1. In other words, 0 and 0.9999999 repeating. And we'll display this out. So I'll add I've got my count, I've got the sum. I want to show the random number. And we said that that was the variable rand num. Save this, run it. Let's run it 10 times so you can see this random number start popping up. And if you look at all these random numbers over here, it's a value between 0 and 0.99999. This one's getting pretty close. It's 0.9963. Here's one of 0.80, here's 1.69, and so on. So that's kind of useful. Well, finally what I want to do with this is I want to be able to use those numbers some way. So for instance, I want to simulate rolling of a dice. I want to play a number guessing game. I want to play a poker game, play blackjack, and so on. Random type events that I would have. So what I need to do is I need to take this number and multiply it by something to print out just kind of a random number as opposed to a random decimal number. So I've got my random number here. I'm going to round that number off. And you can round numbers off, so I'll call it the round num, by using another function. It's called the ceiling function. And what the ceiling function does is it rounds something up to the nearest amount. So it's going to take these and round them. 3.779 is going to get rounded up to 4. So I'm going to take the ceiling of rand num. Now if I just take the ceiling of random number, every single time it's going to round those off, and it's going to round it to the number 1. It's going to round it up 1. So what I want to do is I want to multiply this by some other value. Say I want to get a bunch of random numbers between 1 and 10, between 1 and 100, and so on. So I'll multiply it by whatever it is that I want to have those numbers at. So my round number is ceiling of random numbers times 10. And let's print that out. But I actually want to print it before I print my random number, so they'll line up a little bit closer. So I'm going to come in between here after my loop sum. I'm going to say do the round number, and I want to join that with round num, and then finally I show my random number. So sorry, that last output, it's getting a little bit messy, but again, it's literal plus a variable plus a literal plus a variable. You just put pluses in between each of those. Save this, run it. Let's try it 10 times, and we'll see if we can get this to work. Alright, so as I do this, I've got my numbers 1 through 10. I've got the sum still, so that's still working. Then it rounded this 2.439, it rounded that off to 3. 2.7, it rounded that to 3. I've got 3.6, rounded that to 4. This one gets rounded to 1. It looks like I'm getting random numbers between 1 and 10 in this case. And we can try running it a little bit more just to see if we get another set of numbers. Let's try running it 25 times. And we can speed this up. And it looks as though I've got some numbers here. There's a bunch of 7s, some 8s, 3s, some 1s. Let's try one more time. Let's round this off. Let's try it to 100. And it's churning through. There's a 10, so indeed, you know, it gives me some numbers up to 10, you know, just kind of scrolling through some of these. I've got 9s, 1s, there's some more 10s that showed up. So that's how we can generate some different random numbers and play something like that. So hope that gives you a few ideas about setting up random numbers, how to round them off, and run some things through a loop.